The building had not stood long before it gave way. A narrow, aging structure with sun-bleached walls and rusted railings now folded in on itself like an emptied shell. The silence that followed was thick and unnatural. No creak of settling beams, no murmur of wind. Just dust in the air and a stillness that settled like a blanket over the ruin. But then, almost too faint to notice, came a sound. Not sharp, not desperate. A low, fractured whimper, barely more than breath. It rose from somewhere deep within the collapsed structure, muffled beneath concrete and splintered wood. Not a cry for help, just proof that something inside was still alive. Two rescue workers paused. The others kept moving, eyes scanning. Voices hushed in the solemn rhythm of post-disaster work. But one man, older than most, with a patience built from years of listening to silence, turned toward the sound. He didn't call out. He didn't rush. He crouched low and placed his hand on a broken beam, the dust coating his fingers as he pressed his ear toward the rubble. The whimper came again, slightly higher this time, a tremble in it, as if from pain, or cold, or the confusion of being trapped. He moved with quiet precision, not disturbing what didn't need to be touched. Every shift of debris was deliberate, every breath held between creaks of concrete. A small team joined him, but they followed his pace, his stillness. No barking, no scratching, just that sound. Fading now, quieter, as if even the breath behind it was tiring. Minutes passed, dust choked the air, and the narrow passage into the wreckage opened by their hands led only to darkness. But at the end of that dark, under the tilted frame of a door and the lean of a slab, they saw her. A dog, mottled coat, dull with ash and fine grit. She lay on her side, legs tucked in close, ribs faintly rising. One eye was swollen shut. The other blinked slowly, not in fear, more in resignation. Her body didn't shift, didn't struggle. She had long since stopped trying to move. She didn't lift her head as the man crawled forward. He whispered only once, "It's okay, girl." The words were quiet, more vibration than sound. His hand moved slowly, palm facing down, fingers open. He let her see it. She didn't flinch. Her ear twitched slightly, then stilled. The concrete above her back pressed low, pinning her against debris. It hadn't crushed her, not fully, but there wasn't space for escape. Just enough room for shallow breath. Her flank trembled once, then went still again. She had stopped making sounds. One by one, they stabilized the edges of the slab, wedged in pieces of steel, and shifted smaller chunks from around her paws. Dust fell. Wood groaned, but the man kept his eyes on hers. She watched him without blinking. When the last beam lifted, the silence held. She didn't rise. Her legs stayed folded, breath shallow. Only her eye moved, following the hand that reached under her chest, gently, to feel for a break. No yelp, no growl. Just a low exhale, like the body had nothing left to hold. Her paws were scraped. The pads are raw, nails broken. She had tried, once, to dig, but not for long. The man slid his arms under her slowly, like lifting something that might shatter. She didn't resist. Her head rested against his chest, limp and warm. One leg twitched as he turned, backing out through the narrow tunnel. Dust coated them both by the time they emerged. The daylight was soft, filtered through the drifting clouds and smoke from nearby fires. Someone brought a blanket. Someone else cleared a path. But the man didn't speak again. He just carried her a few feet beyond the rubble and knelt, setting her down with the blanket beneath her. She blinked once in the open air. The breeze stirred her fur and her ribs moved again, just slightly deeper now. She didn't cry. She didn't move, but something in the line of her body, the way her neck rested more fully on the blanket, the way her back legs unfolded just a little, said she knew she was no longer alone. And for now, that was enough. The dog lay wrapped in a thin blanket, her body unmoving beneath its folds. Dust clung to her fur in clumps, mixing with blood dried into her paws. Her breathing had steadied, but the rhythm was shallow and uncertain. The workers moved around her, speaking low and briefly, but none touched her again. She had been brought from beneath the ruin, but something still held her under. Not the weight of stone now, but something quieter, something invisible. The man who had pulled her out knelt beside her once more. He didn't look at the others or speak to them. His attention returned to the dog, not to fix or force, just to be with. His hands hovered near her side, not yet reaching. Her ribs rose once, then paused, as if the space between each breath had become a decision. There was no sound from her, no bark, no growl, no cry, but her eye, the one not swollen shut, opened again. The lid was heavy, and it lifted slowly, uncertainly. It did not search. It simply watched. He waited. The ground beneath them was scattered with pieces of brick and wood, twisted piping, and lengths of insulation like torn fabric across the dust. The air smelt faintly of ash and rusted metal, the scents curling low to the ground where the breeze barely stirred. Somewhere, far down the road, another team was calling out, voices echoing down alleys. But here, beside the dog, everything stayed still. The man shifted only once, placing his hand on the edge of the blanket, gathering it gently to cover her hind leg. Her body flinched, a small reflex more instinct than fear. He withdrew his hand. Her ears remained flat, pressed back against her skull. Her chest rose again, this time slightly deeper. Her gaze didn't break. The stillness between them became something else. Not comfort, not yet, but recognition, a presence shared. He moved slowly, rising to gather more blankets from the supply bag. Someone nearby asked a question he didn't answer. The man returned and laid the fabric beneath her hips, lifting just enough to slide it underneath. Her tail gave a faint twitch, brushing dust as it fell. He sat beside her again, legs folded, palms resting loosely on his knees. He doesn't watch her now. He let her rest. The minutes passed like water, slow and without shape. Over time, her limbs adjusted. Not all at once, but gradually. Her front paw, curled tightly against her chest, unfolded slightly. Her back legs, stiff with tension, stretched a fraction longer over the blanket. Her jaw unclenched, and a wet sound escaped her throat. Not a bark, but a soft, broken exhale. A medic approached quietly. They spoke in a whisper and offered water and a shallow bowl. The man nodded. They set it down and moved back. He didn't try to make her drink. The bowl sat there, untouched, glinting with a ripple of wind. Then came something different. Her eyes closed and then reopened slowly. The movement was delayed, like a memory returning. She blinked, and for the first time her head shifted. Not far, but toward the man. She moved no other part of her body, but her gaze, once passive and dull, now followed. It rested on his shoulder, then his face. She didn't hold it long, just enough. He didn't speak this time. He didn't need to. The soft sound of her breath, the tiny movement of her brow, the way her ears lifted from their flattened press. It was all conversation. He placed the corner of the blanket over her paw. Her claws were chipped and broken, nails torn down. Dirt had wedged between each toe. But now, they still are. She exhaled again, slower, deeper. The shift was not dramatic. It was not sudden. But the quiet began to change. Where there had been stillness born of shock, there now grew the beginning of rest. Not peace, not yet, but the first step toward it. The man leaned back slightly, resting on his hands. A bird called distantly above the roofless sky. The sounds of the city trying to rebuild moved faintly behind them. A hammer strike, a voice calling for tools. But between dog and man, the silence remained sacred. Her eyes closed again. This time, it stayed shut. The man stood only once more just to move his body from the stiff crouch. But even as he did, The dog's ear flicked slightly at the shift in his weight. She knew he was still there. The rescue team gathered a stretcher, one built low with soft fabric and a steady frame. It was not urgent now. No one rushed. The dog did not panic. She didn't struggle. She had not healed, but she had allowed herself to rest. That alone was enough to guide the next step. He knelt again, lifted the corner of the blanket, slid one arm gently beneath her shoulder. Her body tensed for a moment, then released. Her chest moved, once, twice, then steadied. "You're almost there," he whispered. No one else spoke. No one needed to. She was placed on the stretcher with the blanket wrapped tight around her, head resting low. The man kept one hand on the edge of the fabric as they lifted her. His touch stayed light. She did not move. As they walked, her eyes remained closed. Her breath rose and fell with a soft rhythm. And the man, walking beside her, didn't look back at the ruin. He kept his eyes forward, watching only the line where light met the edge of dust. The stretcher moved slowly over uneven ground, guided by steady hands and careful feet. The man remained at the front, his fingers resting lightly on the edge where the blanket wrapped around her. His face was quiet, not drawn in thought but softened by the kind of silence that follows the hardest part. Behind him, two medics held the frame, careful not to jar her. No one spoke. The air was heavy with dust and heat, the kind that settles behind the eyes and tastes of ash. A breeze stirred, but did not cool. The dog remained motionless, her weight barely registering on the frame. Her eyes stayed closed, her limbs tucked tight beneath the warmth of the blanket. Her ribs rose with slow, deliberate effort. There was no urgency now, only time. The kind that stretches in spaces where pain has been endured and survival quietly begins. They reached the base station where triage tents had been set in a line against the edge of the debris zone. It was not a hospital, just a clearing with tarpaulin shade and a table stacked with gauze and salve. A few dogs already rested nearby, some standing, some asleep. None made a sound. They all shared the same quiet. Animals taken from chaos, bodies adjusting to a life no longer under weight. The man helped ease her to the ground, resting her gently on a pad placed beside a water bowl. Again, she didn't flinch. Her eyes remained closed, but her ears moved. First one, then the other, shifting faintly as if tuning into the new place around her. A medic knelt to inspect her paws. There were no words, just the quiet pressure of fingers checking for breaks, the brush of cloth removing grit from torn skin. Her tail moved slightly, twitching once before stilling again. Then, as the man stepped back to allow the medic space, her eyes opened. Not fully, just a narrow slit, enough to follow his motion. Her head did not move, but the eye tracked him. He noticed but said nothing. He crouched again, folding his arms loosely across his knees. For a moment they simply stayed that way. A dog resting, a man keeping watch. The wind picked up slightly, stirring dust into the folds of the tent. Nearby, a worker called for supplies. Another passed with a stack of folded blankets. But none of it interrupted the quiet between them. Then, almost too soft to catch, a sound. It came from the dog. Not the sharp whimper of pain, not a growl. A different note. Short, breathy, and urgent in a way that didn't seem to ask for help but offered something else. The man leaned forward, listening. The dog made the sound again, a high, soft yip, then stopped. It wasn't fear, it wasn't distress, it was something searching. The man looked at her closely now. Her eyes had widened, her ears were pricked. The stillness that had wrapped around her like a shell began to shift, not fully breaking, but cracking along the edges. She tried to move her front leg. It twitched, then dragged slightly forward. She let out another sound, the same high, pulsing call. The medic paused. The man placed a hand lightly on her back. "What is it, girl?" His words were a murmur. Not a question seeking an answer, just presence. The dog moved again, trying to lift her head. It rose only a few inches before falling back. But her body had changed, no longer curled into resignation. Her limbs now tensed with something closer to will. She yipped again, this time with a rougher edge. The man looked past her, toward the ruins they had left behind, toward the building's collapsed edge where the rescue had begun. There had been no sign of others, no movement, no other sound. But she kept calling. It was not loud, not frantic, but it carried. He rose slowly. His eyes scanned the debris field. Then he turned to the lead medic and spoke quietly. A nod passed between them. The man walked back toward the edge of the rubble, not hurried, but with direction. His steps were careful. The dust beneath his boots shifted in soft clouds. When he reached the base of the wreckage, he paused, listening. The wind dropped. Silence returned. He waited. Then, a faint sound, barely more than a breath. Not the sharp bark of warning, not a howl. A smaller sound, thin, fragile. A whimper. He moved toward it. The path through the rubble was narrow. The building had folded inward, creating small caverns beneath broken flooring. He crawled carefully, calling no names, giving no instructions, just moving toward the breath between heartbeats. The sound came again, sharper now. It was coming from beneath a slab angled against a crushed cabinet. He knelt, listening. There, in the shadow, a flicker of movement. A smaller shape, no more than a few weeks old. Dusty fur, dark eyes, trembling limbs, a puppy, alive. The man exhaled slowly, his hand extended, fingers flat to the ground, palm up. The pup didn't move at first, then a shuffle, a weak whimper. It tried to step forward but stumbled. The man slid further in, using one arm to brace the slab above. The space was tight. The air was close. Easy now. His voice stayed low. He reached out, scooping the pup gently, folding its legs against its chest. The small body was warm, damp, and coated in dust. Its eyes blinked rapidly, trying to understand light again. The man backed out slowly, one arm protecting the pup's head. When he emerged, a few workers nearby stopped to watch. No one spoke. Dust swirled softly at their feet. He returned to the dog. She was sitting now, not fully, but raised on one elbow, head lifted. Her eyes tracked him as he approached. Her body trembled with effort, but she didn't lower it. When she saw the pup, she whined. It was not loud, but it was full. The man knelt and placed the pup beside her. It stumbled on its paws, nose twitching, legs unsure. She shifted, one paw sliding forward. The pup pressed against her chest and collapsed into her side. Her body curved around it without effort, as if drawn by an instinct older than pain. Her eyes closed. The man watched. The wind stirred again. This time it was cool. It moved over the tarp and brushed the fur of mother and pup, now curled together beneath its shade. The medic approached quietly, laying another blanket down. The man stood slowly. The moment had passed. Not dramatic, not grand. Just real. Mother and child, found in fragments. Breathing together now. Still broken, but no longer alone. The dog's body curled instinctively, her ribs creating a soft wall around the small shape now pressed against her. Her breath was labored but deeper now, steadier. The pup nestled closer, its fur still matted with grime, its legs folding in tightly beneath its belly. Neither moved much. They didn't need to. In that stillness, something essential had returned. The man sat nearby, hands resting loosely on his thighs. He had seen this kind of reunion only a few times in his work, always quiet, always delicate, never certain. The bond between mother and young was not dramatic or loud. It was slow, sensory, the touch of a chin, the tremble of breath. The smallest sound was exchanged, not for meaning, but for connection. The mother had stopped whimpering. Her body remained tense in parts, the stiffness of trauma not yet released, but her jaw had relaxed and her ears no longer pulled tightly against her skull. The pup made no more cries, only the rhythmic sound of its small breaths as it sank further into her warmth. Around them, the camp moved at its own pace. A stretcher was lifted nearby, a tarp adjusted to block wind. Radios buzzed occasionally, their static low and even. The world continued its motion, but the space around mother and pup held still. That stillness felt earned. The man rose after some time, his knees creaking faintly as he stepped away to let them rest. He needed water, a wash of his hands, a moment to let the weight of the discovery settle into his chest where it could breathe. But just as he turned, the dog shifted. A sudden, tense movement of her head, ears rising, nose twitching toward the open air. Her body remained low, but alertness returned to her limbs. The pup stirred in response, pressing closer, but she didn't curl further in. Her nose lifted again, testing something the others could not sense. He paused and watched her carefully. She was not in pain. She was listening. Then it came, faint, lost in the rustle of fabric and distant voices. A sound so thin it could be mistaken for wind in a pipe or the creak of settling wood. But she heard it again. The tip of her tail moved, her ears turned. The man stepped forward, tilting his head. He stilled his breath, letting the background noise fall away. For a moment, nothing. Then, soft as breath against stone, a cry. Not hers, not the pup's. A second one. It came from the far edge of the ruins, closer to where the building had buckled into itself. A place already searched once, marked with orange chalk. Deemed empty. The man turned. He didn't shout. He gestured once to the medic nearby, then moved toward the collapsed wall. The ground was uneven, strewn with shards of glass and bare strips of metal. He walked slowly, stepping over fragments, eyes scanning for a pocket of space where sound might travel. The wall angled sharply at the bottom, creating a low cavity just beneath a tilted doorway. Dust shifted in the breeze as he knelt. He waited. The cry came again. Closer now. His hand reached forward, brushing aside debris. The space beneath the frame was just large enough for a small animal to fit. He lay flat, pressing one shoulder beneath the lowest beam, his cheek close to the ground. A small, sharp breath. There. Another pup. It was barely moving. Nestled between two chunks of drywall, one paw stretched outward, the rest of its body wedged tight against a broken beam. Its eyes were closed, its ribs rising too fast. The man didn't speak. He reached carefully, flattening his palm and sliding it inward. The pup did not resist. It was too weak. When his fingers brushed its side, it flinched faintly but did not move away. He adjusted, turning his wrist to cup the pup's belly, then lifted slowly, drawing the body out from the narrow space. It was light, softer than the first. Its breathing was thin and rapid but steady. The man backed out on his elbows, holding the pup against his chest. As he stood, a medic stepped forward with a blanket. He wrapped the small form and held it close, warming the pup against the chill of the air that had started to rise as the afternoon turned. Back at the tent, the mother had not shifted position. Her head was up now, eyes wide, gaze fixed in the direction the man had gone. The first pup slept, pressed close to her belly. But she remained alert, nose quivering. When the man approached, she let out a low sound. Not a bark, not a whine. A tone shaped by longing. He crouched beside her and gently unwrapped the blanket. The second pup made a weak noise, head lolling against his palm. She leaned forward, stretching her neck just enough to touch her nose to its back. A pause. Then, slowly, she lifted her paw and adjusted her body to make space. The man laid the pup beside its sibling. It trembled, then stilled as her warmth enclosed it. She looked up only once more, directly at the man. Her eyes were dull with exhaustion but no longer glazed. He nodded slightly and stepped back again. The two pups lay tucked against her, their breathing light and staggered. Her flank rose around them like a low hill. She did not sleep, but her eyes closed. The medic returned and placed a shallow bowl of warmed broth near her muzzle. She didn't drink right away, but her ears remained forward, her body no longer coiled in defense. The scent reached her, and after a moment, her tongue flicked out, tasting the edge. Evening light began to stretch across the clearing. The dust had settled. The city behind the camp moved on. Distant machines. The low hum of traffic, a helicopter circling farther off. But in this small pocket of stillness, nothing moved except the breeze and the slow breathing of life newly rejoined. Not one cry, but two. Not one miracle, but another quietly waiting beneath the silence. The night passed quietly in the field shelter, blanketed in the scent of dust, canvas, and something tender. The quiet hum of breath, of warmth exchanged without sound. The mother stirred only when necessary, adjusting herself with slow care so her body remained wrapped around the two pups now sleeping against her belly. She did not lift her head. She didn't cry out. Her gaze remained fixed inward, on the small lives pressed into her. Her body still trembled now and then, as if the memory of collapse had not yet released its grip. But in the stillness, her limbs loosened. Her jaw softened. She slept in pieces, enough to hold on. The pups twitched through dreams, legs flinching, noses flicking softly against the matted fur of her chest. Their bellies moved with quick, shallow breaths, their ribs not yet sure of the world outside their mother's body. Their coats, still dull with ash, had begun to take shape, fur drying in soft tufts beneath the cloth that had been laid over them during the night. A medic had checked on them once, gently cleaning the crusted debris from their faces and checking paws for fractures. There had been no words. Just the motion of someone used to treating what can't yet speak for itself. By morning, the wind had turned. Cooler now, coming down from the north with the faint bite of autumn behind it. The heat from the collapsed buildings had faded, and in its place came the smell of soil, rusted iron, and the brittle scent of smoke still trapped in the concrete. But overhead, the sky began to clear, a pale stretch of blue breaking through the dull silver haze. The man arrived before sunrise. He moved without sound, stepping past tarps and crates, nodding to one of the medics as he made his way back to the corner where she lay. He paused at a distance. Her ears lifted, her head rising slightly. Their eyes met again, not with alarm, but with quiet recognition. She didn't rise. Her body was too worn, but she shifted just enough to let him see the pups still tucked safely into her. One had pressed its nose beneath her chest. The other had stretched its front leg across the curve of her rib. She breathed through her nostrils, slow and deliberate. He crouched beside them and waited. No tools in hand, no bandages, no leash, just the silence of presence. His eyes moved from her to the pups and then beyond, toward the edges of the camp where the city's broken outline loomed. For a while, no one moved. Then, after some quiet conversation among the team, they decided it was time to carry her farther from the ruins, to a quieter space where animals were being taken for longer care. A van had been cleared out, its interior lined with blankets and soft towels. It would not be far, just across the southern edge of the rescue zone, where a local vet had cleared a room for the most fragile animals. The plan was simple. She would rest there, be examined properly, fed slowly, and, if she survived, released in time. But she would not go alone. They brought the stretcher again, slower this time, with no urgency. 2 hands lifted it beside her, and the man crouched down beside her body, now heavier with fatigue than pain. He spoke just once, barely above a whisper. "It's okay, girl." She watched him as he reached under her chest. There was no resistance, only a slight twitch of her paw. When they lifted her, her head rested softly against the blanket's edge. The pups were gathered next, each wrapped gently in cloth, then placed on either side of her ribs. The medic arranged the covering so their bodies remained close to hers. She didn't flinch. She closed her eyes. As they carried her through the camp, heads turned. Not in awe, not in celebration, but in stillness. A moment held open by something other than tragedy, a glimpse of what had survived. The man walked beside her again, hand resting lightly on the frame of the stretcher. He did not look at the onlookers. He watched her. The small curve of her body around her young, and the rise and fall of breath between them. He did not smile. He did not speak again. The van door opened and they placed her inside. She did not stir. The pups began to sleep again, legs twitching faintly beneath the blanket. The door closed and the vehicle eased away over gravel and broken street. Later that day, the man returned alone to the space where she had first been found. The debris had been marked and logged, a thin line of caution tape stretched across the perimeter. But no one stopped him. He moved through slowly, stepping over fallen beams, looking for nothing in particular. The air smelt the same: concrete dust, scorched wood, rust. But something in it had changed. There was no longer that heavy stillness, the kind that hangs when life is buried. There was space now, space and air. He knelt near where the first sound had been heard. A shallow rise of dust still covered the earth, but in the corner of a broken wall, something stirred. A dry leaf, caught in the wind. It turned once, then stilled again. The city would take time to heal. Whole blocks were left fractured, families scattered, memories etched into stone and ash, but in the smallest spaces, in the quietest moments, something had lived, against the weight of ruin, against the noise of falling walls. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the skeletal edge of the city's skyline, the man stepped away from the rubble. He didn't look back. His boots moved softly through the wind-blown dust. His shadow stretched long behind him, swallowed by the golden light that touched everything it passed. Somewhere, the dog slept. Her body curved around her young. The world, still broken, held them gently in its arms.